introduce Eric, and I'm so thrilled because Eric's a guy whose work I've enjoyed afar, and I've always really liked being at the Moth when he's in it. So we really are so thrilled he's in the show. And Eric is a marketing executive, an amateur wood carver, and the father of two amazing young ladies and one very odd dog. Eric won the Moth Grand Slam in 2017 and has been featured on the Moth Radio Hour twice. He has a history and literature degree from Harvard, a weakness for spicy food, and an unrequited love for the Boston Red Sox. Ladies and gentlemen, Eric Call.
Wow, that was quite a build-up. It's actually really exciting and an honor to be here tonight as the only single storyteller and not a little awkward. So let me take you back. November 29th, 2006. I'm sure you remember it. It was a beautiful, unseasonably warm Wednesday, and I had just spent 2 days in Columbus, Ohio for work. I'm racing back south on 71 back to Louisville, and I got the sunroof open, and the sun and warm air is streaming in, and I got the music turned up entirely too loud. And really, the two words that could best describe me on that night were giddy and doomed. I'm giddy because at the time I'm 40 years old and I have a date that night back in Louisville. And I'm doomed because I'm entirely unqualified to have a date that night. As I mentioned, I was 40 at the time, and I was recently divorced from my wife of 15 years, who was my college sweetheart. So we had been together our entire adult lives. So even if you can get past the fact that I'm hauling around a massive amount of emotional baggage at the time, you can't escape the fact that I haven't had a date since the Reagan administration. But never fear. This is why they invented Match.com. Because I learned that Match.com is how recently divorced, socially inept people meet. And so I'm really excited because my date for that night is Fireball. That wasn't her real name. That was her Match handle. And I'm excited because Fireball seems almost too good to be true. It seemed like. She was smart, she was funny, she was creative, she was confident, and I learned that we actually had a lot of things in common, not the least of which was the fact that we were both recently divorced from long-term marriages, so we're set up for success right from the get-go. Thank you, Match.com. But the first thing that I learned about Fireball that night of our first date was that she was really punctual. Because she showed up at exactly 7 o'clock that night at the Bristol for drinks, and I knew, punctual. I'm in love. And really, that night began our storybook whirlwind romance, because within a year, Fireball and Sox Fan 7 were married. And within a year, Fireball and Sox Fan 7 were divorced. I mean, it's funny, but I don't mean to make fun. Because honestly, those were probably the two most traumatic, confusing years of my life, and probably of her life too. And on this night where we're supposed to be telling two sides of the story, let's just stipulate that I was probably wrong. Because I know what you're thinking, honestly. We should have known better. Really, we should have known better. But barring that, we should have at least paid attention to the signs that were sent from the gods telling us to stop and turn back. And the most obvious of these signs came on our first date that night. And by all accounts, it was the perfect first date. Because drinks turned into dinner, and then dinner turned into dessert. And we flirted and we laughed, and then the waitstaff got impatient with us. So we left the restaurant and we went around the corner to Heine Brothers that night to get coffee. And it was still a beautiful, warm night, So we brought our coffee outside to those concrete tables, the really comfortable concrete tables. And we sat down, and no sooner did we sit down that we both spotted them. In the middle of the table, 3 perfectly intact, hollow-tipped bullets. Just sitting there. Now, a normal, rational human being would have seen the bullets for what they were, which was an unmistakable sign of impending disaster. But I was not normal or rational. I was crazy. I was desperate for this relationship or any relationship to work. And so for our entire 2-year relationship, Fireball and Sox Fan 7 went to great lengths to convince ourselves that those 3 bullets were a good omen. Of course. For example, I wrote a poem about those 3 bullets. I don't write poems, but I wrote a poem about those 3 bullets. I called it Cupid is Packing Heat. And Fireball was a writer, so she wrote a story about my poem about the bullets, and then all of that stuff was published in a Valentine's Day magazine, so we were off to a roaring start. By the time the wedding came around, we took the bullet thing over the top. On every table at the reception, we had bullet-shaped candy. On the wedding cake, the frosting resembled bullets. We even commissioned a glass blower to create special champagne flutes in the shape of a bullet for the toast. But the best idea, one Christmas, well, one of the 2 Christmases, I took one of the 3 bullets, and I was going to have it made into a charm, for a charm bracelet, and I was going to have it engraved with the day that we first met, November 29th, 2006, in case you forgot. And I took it to the jeweler, and I explained to him this really romantic, really original idea that I had, and he smiled, big grin, and he looked at me over his glasses, and he says, "You need to leave now." So screw him, and screw the next 4 jewelers that I went to, but the 5th jeweler, he at least had pity on me, and he said to me, "You should take that to a custom jeweler," which is basically an artist because they do shit like that. And he gave me the name of somebody that he knew, and I went to meet this guy immediately, and I went to his shop, and his shop was basically a garage on a back alley. So I was a little bit scared, but he meets me there, and he's this big, affable, friendly, gregarious guy, think like John Goodman. And he's standing there with his son. It's actually a father and son team, and his son looked nothing like him. Think Art Garfunkel, frizzy, red hair, and he never talked. So anyway, so the dad takes the bullet in his hand, and he just sort of rolls it around like he's really inspecting it, like looking at it real hard. And then he surprises me when he says, "Well, sure, we'll do it. Give us a week, cash only." So I go back in a week, and this guy meets me there. He's standing in the doorway of the garage, and he's giddy. He's like bouncing around. And he practically drags me into the garage, and he's got the charm laid out on a piece of black velvet on the counter. And it's illuminated by a single overhead light, which I later discovered was a mag light that he had duct taped to the rafters. But anyway, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. He had done an amazing job on this charm. I didn't think it could be so beautiful. But what he's really excited about is that it's one of a kind. He says to me, "I've never made anything like it before, and I promise you, I will never make anything like it again." And I thought that was a funny comment. I was going to ask him why, but he volunteered. He said, "There was a bit of an incident. You see, before we could engrave it, we had to take it apart to take the powder out, and well, when we did that, it kind of exploded." And I said, "Oh my God." He says, stops me again. He says, "No regrets. What's the saying? Whatever doesn't kill me just makes me stronger." Which, for a garage on a back alley, was remarkably philosophical. So I'm nodding, and at that moment, the son, Art Garfunkel, comes out from the back room in the garage, and the right side of his face is red and blistered, and he's missing an eyebrow and most of the hair on this side of his head. And I'm like, oh my God. But then I see that he's smiling. He's happy. And he walks across the garage, and he picks up the charm, and he places it in my hand, and he says to me the only 2 words that I ever heard him utter: "Good luck." Yeah. So yeah, that bullet did not kill him. Those 2 years did not kill me. And in fact, today I know that I needed those 2 years. And it's because of that that tonight I can confidently say, Fireball, if you're out there, I don't regret a single day. And if I could go back to November 29th, 2006, and do it all over again, if you could wink at me on Match.com one more time, I'm smart enough to say, let's talk in a couple years. Thank you.